Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Sarah and today we will be talking about how I manage to water all of these plants and have a life and not drive myself insane. So before we start, I just want to put out a little disclaimer. This is not necessarily the best way to water plants. I'm sure a lot of my plants have a little bit different preferences. This might be a little less than ideal, but this is just what I do to keep myself from going insane. Make sure that I get to every single plant and I'm not spending 5 hours of my week watering plants, which I don't have time for. My first tip is to have a schedule of some sort set up for yourselves. Mine happens to be 2 days a week that I kind of check in with my plants, check and see what their water levels look like, water any plants that maybe need to be watered. That's Wednesday or someday kind of around there. So sometimes it ends up Tuesday night, sometimes it ends up being Thursday morning or Thursday evening. But I go around and I check just any plants that I think might be close to needing to be watered on Wednesdays, and then I will grab a few of those plants that do need to be watered, take them to the sink, do a full water and drain, and that kind of takes care of a few plants here and there. The next day is either Saturday or Sunday, sometimes a little bit of both. So today I did a big watered a bunch of my plants, but if I didn't have that kind of time, I might water just a few that I know are need a lot of water, and get to some that I know can wait a day on Sunday mornings. And of course, in between that time, I check in with some of my higher maintenance plants, some of my calatheas, my orchids, things like that that I know have a higher water need. I might check in on a little bit more frequency, but having that schedule that I can follow really takes a lot of the pressure off that I'm not checking every single plant every single day. And I kind of know which ones need to be checked more often and which ones don't. Along those lines, I tend to water on weeknights instead of on weekday mornings. On the weekends, I can water in the morning and it's fine. I know that the mornings are probably a little bit more ideal of a time to water. And if you have seen Summer Rain, her channel is awesome. She talks about the ideal time to water plants, but she also makes a really great point in there that the best time to water a plant is whenever you can water a plant, right? To water a plant is better than to not water it because you can't water it at an ideal time. So for me to come home in the afternoon after a day of teaching and just check in with a few plants, water them, put them back, takes a few minutes and it's not a big deal. So watering is better than watering at an ideal time. The next thing that I do is I use a tool. I love my moisture meter. So I've gotten a few comments a few times on some of my videos that my soil looks dry, and it very often does. So the heat here in Grand Junction is kind of high. I get lots and lots of beautiful light in my house, and sometimes that very top layer of soil will actually dry out. And in order to make sure that I'm not overwatering my plants, I use a moisture meter. I really like this model. It's really cheap and it's very, very effective. It's been really useful for me. I'll make sure I link to it down below. But what I do when I go around, I just stick that in the plant and I make sure that it is at a level where it actually needs water. If you want a specific video on kind of how I use the moisture meter with different types of plants, for instance, my Hoyas or with my calatheas, things like that, what levels I'm looking for, I would be happy to do that. On the whole, I let my plants dry out except for some of those more high moisture ones, the calatheas, things like that. But for the most part, most of my plants actually dry out in between waterings. Some of them actually really prefer that. The other thing I do, if I really am low on time, most of my plants are either in cover pots or in a shallow dish. So I will use a watering can, right? And that saves me a bunch of time. I'm not taking the plants out of the cover pot over to the sink, letting them drain and having them come back. I'm usually very, very careful if I'm going to use the watering can and leave it in its pot, that I'm not using the same amount of water that I would if I was letting it drain at the sink. So this is kind of, for me, a substitute until I can get around to watering it. It needs to be watered, but I don't have time for a full water. So just to hold it over a day or two, I will just give it a little sprinkle with the watering can. So the other reason my watering can comes in really handy is I prefer to feed my plants weekly, okay? So I use a very, very small amount of food in my plants, and it's not necessarily every single week. It's probably, I feed them really weekly. Really, it's whenever I think about it. I try to shoot for every couple of weeks, so maybe every 2 or 3 weeks, every second or third time that I've watered that plant, I'm feeding it. A couple of my favorites, I like the pre-diluted plant food. I'm not necessarily super fond of the Miracle-Gro, and hopefully you can see little Loki is here in the frame trying to get some attention. So if you see him pop up or hear him, he has been kind of throughout this video. This just happened to be the food that I saw at the store. I needed to go get some food. It was already diluted, but this means that I can dilute it even more. I will put probably a tablespoon or 2 of this into my water, as well as this, which I am really fond of. This is the Super Thrive. You can find this pretty much at any local market. I'll try to link to it below on Amazon. This stuff has been a life changer. Once I started adding a drop or 2 when I feed the plants, I have noticed 2 or 3 days later, that plant will pretty much guaranteed pop out new leaves. I have a bunch of my Hoyas have peduncles. If you've seen some of my Hoya videos, I really think that this Super Thrive has a lot to do with it. So I highly recommend adding just a little bit, and it's nice and weak, so you're not really at risk of overfeeding your plants. So I know this was kind of a quick video. Like I said, it's been a busy couple of weeks starting out the school year, but I just wanted to pop on and kind of give you an idea, how do I manage to keep all my plants watered when I am this busy? And hopefully it gives you a few ideas for how you can kind of manage your own schedule. And really, you just have to find what works for you. If you find something that works for you, that's the thing that you're going to stick with. So for me, that's twice a week, just kind of checking in on plants and pulling a few here and there to water when they need them. That really I've had some huge success with that. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any more specific questions about watering, feeding, all that kind of stuff, please leave those in the comments below, and I will see you next week. Bye.